All right, we're now recording the meeting. This is the first monthly cartography community meeting. We have with us a lot of people. Why don't we go run around, do a quick round of introductions. I'm Alex.
Andrew.
And
Lift Red Team.
Lift Red Team as well.
Yeah, and I'm Marco.
Hey, Marco. Yeah, whoever, just jump right in.
Hey, I'm Phil Gates-Idom. I work at Jupiter One.
Okay. So I'm Ramon Petgrave. Yeah, I work at a company that I'm not sure I'm really allowed to say yet.
Yep.
But yeah, not like I'm not really representing them yet, I should say. But yeah, I started working on cartography last summer at Cruise. Okay.
Hi, I'm Surbi. I work at Lyft with Alex. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Divya. I work for the product security team at Lyft.
Cool, awesome. Oh, I see Dan just joined too. Hey Dan, you wanna say hi?
Yep. Hey everyone. I work with Alex at Lyft on the security team. Not sure what else to say yet. I have yet to make very meaningful contributions, but because I just started at Lyft. But
Awesome. Yeah, so what I was envisioning for this meeting is that we would just create a space where all of us, we could talk informally about anything we wanted about the project, future ideas for features, problems that you have. And sometimes it's easy to just have a real-time conversation rather than going back and forth on Slack about any PRs or issues that are up, things that you want to think about for long-term with the community. I was hoping also to get everybody that was using our project, we would love to hear more about how you're using cartography, which is why I've invited Marco here. And Marco has been kind and gracious enough to volunteer his time to not only putting a blog post together, but offering to give us our first show and tell this evening for him, but for us, it's afternoon time. So in future, we may want to adjust the timing there. We'll figure that out. But definitely, I want to encourage everybody to feel free to do your own show and tells. We absolutely want to hear how you're using our tool. And today we're gonna have Marco show us his deployment story, and then I'll talk a little bit about roadmap and where we're thinking about things that we're interested in the next, X number of months. And then kind of open up the floor for some Q&A, and then we will see where that goes. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, since it's like super late for Marco, I'm gonna yield the floor to you. So how do I stop? All right, feel free to, you have the floor, Marco, take it away.
Let me see if I can present. Let me see. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So a bit of a background. The company I work for is fully cloud native and cloud agnostic. So everything, even internal tooling, needs to run on Kubernetes. That's our abstraction layer. So when we started looking at cartography, we wanted a way to be able to run cartography inside a Kubernetes cluster. And I hope you can see the picture here on screen. And what we ended up having is a cron job running daily on our main tooling project on GCP. And from this project, we are able to basically analyze all our GCP project and AWS accounts. And from there, basically, the actual deployment is more or less what you can see now. We are using Neo4j as a stateful set replicated in the cluster with a couple of services, one for HTTP traffic and one for the BOLD protocol, and one main ingress. And alongside the stateful set, we have a cron job dedicated to cartography, And then I'm not gonna bore you with all the details. Basically, we are using Vault to fetch secrets like the Neo4j password and also the access keys for AWS or Google Cloud. But more or less, this is in the end our setup. It's been running daily since November, I think, as of now. And so far, actually, so good. So we already found some misconfiguration since day one, so we are quite happy with it, to be fair. Up and running, and the security team is using it daily, but we wanted to be able to enable other teams within the company to use the data we can fetch with cartography. So the Neo4j browser, as you might know, is very useful for runtime explorations, but is not straightforward to instrument it and to automate it. So we had quite a brainstorming inside Thought Machine, my company, and we ended up defining a kind of query format that we are using, which is basically augmenting the Cypher query with some metadata that we use to then programmatically filter the query we want. So we have tags for the source, if it's clouds, and I'll tell you why we have this, because we plan to extend it with other sources, AWS or GCP, security or non-security, and different things. And so we ended up, as if you're curious, you can have a look at the blog post, basically having reports in Jupyter targeted to different teams that different teams can consume. For example, there is one for inventory that our SRE teams actually is loving it, because they can have a look of what, for example, what instances are we using and so forth. So that's what we have so far, and is working perfectly. That's also a bit of a preview of what we are working on. That's not completely public yet, but we plan to talk about this in the next weeks or month. So in Thought Machine, we use a monorepo, and we have defined a way to basically, for every microservice, add some metadata that can help us understand basically from every service some of the features like error codes, languages, description. But also we are using this metadata to attach and describe what services this service is using from HashiCorp Vault, what team is owning this service, product, project, applications. The core three you see here is the name of our monorepo, but also, most importantly, egress. So we are basically want to define what microservice is talking to what other microservices. And the end goal then is to use this to enforce network flow with Istio, for example. But what we are trialing now is to then use cartography to parse this metadata and ingest it in the same Neo4j database, and then having a new set of data we can leverage, like in this case, having queries where we can actually attach services to cloud resources. That's basically, in short, what we are going towards. At the same time, we are also trying to get the integration with G Suite up and running. Alex, you might know there is a there is an issue open on this. We are having some problems with that, but more or less we want to then add G Suite as well, because as you can see here, then we want to be able to link the team to the actual Google group, and then the people in the Google group, and from G Suite then close the loop of what team is owning what service. That's in short what we are working on and what's been our journey so far with cartography. We started in September, and so far actually I'm pretty excited about it. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, so you're running a Neo4j cluster, or is that all just one Neo4j instance?
Is the community edition. So it is basically one instance. One of the main problems of having also the web browser is that there is no RBAC. So that's why we went for the abstraction of Jupyter to basically provide more fine-grained controls.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you very much for that. I think that what I find interesting is that your abstraction of service and then having it all connected to G Suite users, that model looks very similar to what we run over here also. So
Okay.
you have this written in a custom sync job, I'm assuming, like a custom module.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. So far, it's very intertwined with our build system, which is open source. It's called Please, but it's very, very custom. It's basically a descendant of Bazel from Google. So once it's going to be up and running, we're going to try and extract it and make it more usable by the wider community.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think especially the owned by that you have over there, that's a problem that we're working on over here as well. And I'm hoping that I put in an issue for resource tags, like resource groups tags API. I don't 100% understand how it works yet, but I'm hoping that by adding tags, because we don't have a lot of good ownership information, but a lot of service owners, they tag their assets really well, so we can leverage those tags instead with like service name. And you mentioned the G Suite issue. Let's try to circle back with Dean again, since he's the expert guy that put that together on I understand it was a G Suite credential issue, right?
Yeah, basically, just to give you a full context, as security, we don't have access to G Suite. So to get this, I'm going through our IT people, which are very, very good. So I'm relaying basically the instructions, and I sit with them. We are actually following the instruction that for some weird reason, they're still not allowed. And I know there is some confusion. Other people on Stack Overflow on different projects have similar issues.
Gotcha.
So it's interesting. And
Hey, Marco, I have a question. So are you using infrastructure as code? Something like Terraform or?
for deploying cartography, you mean?
No, actually for deploying your services. So I was wondering if you could use like infrastructure as code to find that ownership, like which project or which team owns the code based on where the infrastructure code is.
Yes, up to a certain extent. We are using Terraform heavily. We are moving towards a GitOps approach. We are not fully there yet. But sometimes there are some services that have shared ownership between different teams, some edge cases, and also we want to have a live way also to see if there is some drift, for example, from what we define in Terraform, because one of the things we want to do is then prevent any drift.
Right. Yeah, I think what Alex mentioned using tags is what we've seen people use. And then I could see maybe some advantage to kind of reconcile that with what actually is in your infrastructure code as well.
Yeah, that is how we do it with our internal augmentation here. We're pulling a lot of our infrastructure deploy data in to tie it back to the owning services.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit again about how you're using Vault to authenticate with Neo4j?
Sure. Let me just reshare the screen. So a second. So the idea is, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So as per the documentation on GitHub of cartography, we basically need credentials for AWS and GCP. And basically what we ended up having, we have an AWS backend for Vault. We use the hub and spoke model to create one role in our hub account, able to assume roles in every other sub account to then have the security audit role. And we use the AWS backend of Vault to get STS tokens for this particular role. And for GCP, we have at the organization level, we have a service account able to basically perform a security reviewer operation on basically all the resources. And this again comes straight to Vault, from Vault.
Okay. And then you said something about storing the Neo4j password in Vault?
But and the other thing is Cartography needs to have the Neo4j password to basically connect and dump data, and the same password as well comes from Vault. Actually, let me show you. I have it here, because in the blog post Alex linked, there is actually more or less what we are using. So what we are mounting from Vault, the password for Neo4j, the service account for the security audits, and the AWS credentials, basically.
Okay, so when you want to, use the web interface, right? You also doing the same thing, or you have like another password?
That is the same password for, in this case, the Neo4j. The Neo4j we are using is Click Community, so using the same one. We are considering to upgrade. We are not sure yet if it's worth it at the moment. So in this case, that's the main reason for the main password for Neo4j is shared only across the security team. That's why we provide the abstraction of the basically Jupyter notebooks, because we have more control of the Jupyter server and we don't have to share this password with other people. That's why the main reason is because there is no RBAC on Neo4j.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Any other questions? Cool, yeah. Thank you very much, Marco.
No worries. No worries.
This was super cool.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to go a little bit and talk about our roadmap. I don't think it's going to take that much time. And it's the stuff that you guys can probably see on our minutes anyway. But just to give you guys like a little bit of context, what we have in store of what we are interested in. So in the next month, what I think would be very doable, some low-hanging fruit that we have for cartography is documentation, how to deploy and integrate in different environments, things like Kubernetes, things like getting things that are needed to reduce the friction for new users, including things like having runnable examples on security scenarios. So Andrew, you talked about this, where we would want to have maybe somebody spin up a Docker container, and then it shows that you have your sample JSON data, and then it's doesn't have anything confidential on it, and then you can run a sync off of that data dump, and then you can play with the data right there in that thing. So that's one way to do it. Ramon, I think that you mentioned that there may be other ways to do that as well. These are things that I think that would kind of reduce the friction for people like, oh, I don't want to install Neo4j. That's a lot of work to do. And then kind of the next things in the midterm, what we would want to do is making the sync more resilient. And I've talked about this a little bit on Twitter. I've talked about this in an issue. And the idea here is basically, if I have my AWS sync and if the S3 bucket sync fails, then there's no reason for that to affect my GCP sync. So the idea there is that there's many different ways that you can deal with that. One way is creating a directed acyclic graph where you would have this is my DAG for AWS, this is my DAG for GCP. AWS, if this thing fails, let's go ahead and keep continuing on with the sync. And then so with the AWS graph, you can even have like sub DAGs in there too, where if S3 fails, that's no reason for us to stop and ignore RDS data, for example. But there are some real data dependencies there where if S3 fails, then there's no reason for us to continue on and get S3 ACL data, because that's an actual data dependency. So things like that. And we're kind of debating our options. You can do this pretty simply with maybe even a makefile. Makefile's got DAGs. You can roll your own with making a relatively simple system in Python. You can go complex and then learn Airflow. Like just some pluses and minuses that I kind of want to start the discussion on in chat later on. We definitely will not decide this now or even in the next month or so. This is like midterm thinking. The next thing I want to learn about, get some ideas for, is our drift detection feature, the feature where we can detect changes in time. You have an expectation of this. These are the 5 EC2 instances that we expect to be open to the internet, and then tomorrow there's 7. I want to know what those 2 things are. We have this feature already, but we would like feedback on scenarios and ways to improve this feature. I want to know more about like how people are using it, and then the flaws, and just make it better, honestly. And in the next 6 months, something that we've been thinking about is real-time data. We had a question earlier from within the company about, how up to date is this? Well, we only run it about, kind of like you, Marco, we run it only maybe about a couple times a day. And because the sync does take a decent amount of time to run, it's pretty heavyweight. And so having real-time data, there's certain cases where certain types of data for certain types of customers, they want to know up to the minute or whatever. So one thing that we've been thinking about doing is consuming the event from CloudTrail. And then what that'll do is that we'll consume the stream and then do a diff on the graph and update only what's affected. Again, this is long term, may not even get to it, but it's one of those things that cartography right now currently isn't very good at, that we realize that we might want to explore in the future. And that's basically kind of what I've got on my mind. That's me unloading all of the issues all at once, the way that I see it. Does anybody have any questions or comments so far?
I have one, if I can go. On the drift detection, I think you're completely right. To be honest, we haven't tried that yet. It's something that I want to get on after the G Suite integration. So that's something that we want to try, but yeah, definitely. We haven't tried that yet, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet. Sorry, I haven't tried it yet either. While we were at Cruise, or while I was at Cruise, we just relied on Sumo Logic for that kind of drift detection. So it would it's kind of tricky to set it up, right? But we got it working that way. Because at the time it was sort of a very new feature, right? The drift detection over the summer. Is that right? Yeah.
Right.
But I want to try that out later.
Yeah, if you can play with that, let us know. I already know that part of the documentation is wrong, and then there's an issue out there with the necessary correction, but we want to make it better. And okay, I think that, is there anything else that other PRs or issues that anyone would like to talk about or get eyes on? Marco, I know that you wanted to raise signal for that G Suite problem. Is there anything else that anyone has in mind?
Just haven't got to think too much more about it, but the issue that you raised for me about the extra sample queries, especially in the area related to IAM, I don't have a ton of ideas, but we could, and I think that would be really good for the community, especially people looking at cartography. And I know IAM is like a very complicated area for many developers, and especially orgs where they just don't really have maybe a dedicated security team to look at this and study it. So some insight we have on some IAM queries would be good for that area. And that one networking one that I mentioned, where it's like, let's say you have an instance that someone in your org set up that someone's basically using as a VPN, right? Where they have a whitelist for a single IP address on SSH port 22, right? And they're just using it as a VPN to get around. So stuff like that, you maybe want to identify in your own org, regardless of where you are. So I'm thinking about some more of those things in that area, but yeah.
Networking, remind me one more time?
Okay, so we want to identify instances that are whitelisting port 22 from a single IP address.
Okay.
Yeah. And the use case for that, let's say, is if someone you're trying to identify if potentially someone is using an instance or spinning up an instance just so they can use that as a VPN rather than your already company established corporate VPN.
Gotcha. Do file that one. Yeah, file, like raise the issue in the GitHub and then put that in the Slack. And then I think we can also put in, I guess, we can start brainstorming the extra sample queries in Slack as well. And I think that adding on extra sample queries, I think I'll create an issue. Well, I'll add this onto the issue so that others can brainstorm also as comments so that we can all compose it together.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so this needs issue. All right.
Well, yeah, you actually already made an issue.
Oh, there is an issue? Okay.
Yeah, issue 249, right?
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah. But that's just generally adding more queries. But this specific networking one, yeah, maybe we can add a issue to it, or maybe I can do it over another weekend.
Yeah, add an issue for the networking one, and then let's all brainstorm and put our own queries together on this issue 249. And I think that's kind of all that I had for everybody. Unless there's anything else, I can go ahead and give you guys back 30 minutes of your time.
Hey, Alex. So I jumped into this meeting because Alex invited me, and I had talked to him at this conference I'm at, RSA Security Conference. I just wanted to propose something as kind of like a rough idea. So I guess probably a lot of you haven't heard of Jupyter One, but we are also it's a commercial product that's using a graph database in much the same way cartography is solving the problem. And we had actually started development, and we were kind of released at about the same time. But one thing that I wanted to do is maybe look at sort of joining forces, because we have a pretty extensive group of integrations, and I think there's some collaboration we could do to actually share integrations across the two products. For example, we have AWS integrations, Jira, Okta, and I feel like there's a lot of similarities. And so one thing that I was sort of thinking about is like, how could we create like a marketplace of integrations that would work with cartography?
Sure.
And also with Jupyter One.
We're getting kicked out. We're gonna try to get to another meeting room. All right.
Okay.